This was Ayn Rand's answer to a question following her lecture Defending Businessmen from Unjust Persecution, America's Persecuted Minority, Big Business. What changes would you make as president?
Well, first of all, this is the last thing in the world I would ever want to or advise anyone to attempt, but taking it simply as a hypothetical question. Meaning, what would I advocate if I were in a position for my advice to be immediately put into effect? I would say that I would start decontrolling the economy as fast as rational economic considerations permitted. What do I mean by rational economic considerations? I mean the following. Today, every class of the population is enormously dependent on government controls. Most professions, certainly most businesses, have to function under certain controls, and their activities are calculated on that basis. Therefore, if I or anyone else were to repeal all controls overnight by legislative fiat, that would create a disaster and would be an arbitrary dictatorial action. What a free country would do in such a case is to give all the people concerned sufficient notice to reorganize their economic activities. Therefore, after working out with economists the kind of program necessary to decontrol the country and what control should go first, I would then advise that one pass legislation announcing that a certain type of control will be abolished within a year or 3 years or 5 years, whichever the case may be, the time element being calculated to allow the people involved ample opportunity to readjust their activities gradually. You see, under a free enterprise system, no change happens out of the blue and overnight. Every economic change, every development is gradual, and therefore, in a free society, there are no immediate and disastrous changes. However, in a position where we are today, any sudden change can create enormous disastrous dislocations, and therefore that would be the reason why one would have to decontrol gradually. Now, to be more specific, you asked me what particular legislation I would advocate to be removed first. It would be the antitrust laws. As my lecture presented last week, I consider antitrust laws the most disastrous legislation that has contributed the most to the destruction of free enterprise, and therefore, once you remove that particular cancer, all the others will become much easier to remove. Once you free the most essential and most productive group of our society, namely the industrialists and the businessmen, once you free them from controls, and great many, if not most, of our economic problems would vanish. Even here, one would probably have to combine such a decontrol with a tax reduction law. Otherwise, you are leaving the society in a very improper, unbalanced condition. Namely, any company which is large today has an enormous advantage over competitors who never had a chance even to rise to that level because their earnings had been undercut by taxes. Today, many companies, which in a free society might have been the economic leaders, struggle somewhere halfway down the line or perhaps never start going properly because whichever profit they make are taken away from them in taxes to such an extent that they have no chance to rise to the level of competing with the big companies who were established before today's tax rates went into effect. I'm saying this only very tentatively because these are concrete, specific questions, and an exact answer would depend on the specific facts that one would be facing. However, I'm answering only as a matter of principle. What kind of principle would I advise people to follow in such an issue? And I would say that one would have to remove the antitrust provisions one by one. The first one to go, and this one should go overnight if there were enough people with a sense of justice in this country who care to be active about it. The first thing to go is to repeal the jail penalty provisions of the antitrust laws and to stop sending men to jail for undefined offenses which they had no way of avoiding. First, remove this particular injustice. Not only will it be a matter of plain humanitarian decency, but also it would remove the terrorization of businessmen. It would remove the sword, the threat hanging over their heads, which they have no way of avoiding and which they cannot predict at what time the execution would occur. Therefore, first remove the terrorization on businessmen, then remove the rest of the provisions, all of which today, as I have pointed out in my speech, amount to merely penalizing ability for being ability and sacrificing productive genius to mediocrity. Remove the enforcement of this kind of policy and you would be surprised at the kind of intellectual, moral, and economic renaissance that the country would experience almost immediately. Then proceed with all the other lesser controls. That would be my answer.